Hey everybody, Dutch Sense here. It is 10 p.m. Central Time on July 14th, 2016, and I've got you here on the Earthquake 3D live stream, where we do our nightly updates at 10 p.m. Central Time, bring you up to speed on what's happened since last night at 10 p.m., and we cover the areas that we are expecting for earthquake activity to strike. I do a lot of looking up on this, do a lot of research, so I hope people enjoy this. Right now it looks like there's about roughly 200 people in the chat room, so that's really good to see. You can share this now and tell people they can rewind to hear the update for the next several hours. And if you want to jump over to my YouTube channel, you can go over there and catch last night's update and catch my most recent video. And in case you didn't see my most recent video, let me just go ahead and show you before we get into the earthquake update. Today, a freak rainstorm happened in my backyard, or not in my backyard, but in St. Louis, and in my backyard, a rainbow formed and came down right behind our tree. And it was just a micro rainbow. Very, very interesting to see that. That's just something I recorded, put it on my channel for fun. So if you get a chance, jump over, check that out. And now let's get into the earthquake update. So since last night, we see a few swarms have developed out on the west coast of the United States. Also, a new series of deep earthquakes has struck in South America. And this is just the last 24-hour feed from the USGS. I need to turn on the combined last 7-day feed with the EMSE European feed to show us the overall activity around the globe. The USGS just does not show us a complete picture of what's happening. So since my update last night, we talked about the 4.4 over in the West Pacific happening very far down below. The depth on this was 605 kilometers deep. Now over in the East Pacific, down in Chile, we see, or actually in Bolivia at the border of Chile, we see a deep 5.1 has struck, and that struck just 10 kilometers depth-wise difference from the earthquake in the West Pacific. It struck at roughly 600 kilometers deep. So we have major activity striking on both sides of the Pacific Plate. And this is down below, so when I call this major because we're going to see additional larger earthquakes strike in a shallow area nearby each deep earthquake epicenter. As if that wasn't all enough, we also have a new report of an eruption at Mount Bromo over in South Indonesia. Indonesia over here, we have Sumatra along the borderline with India and the island chain with India that reaches down to Sumatra. And then we have the 5.1 striking in south central Indonesia. Well, we have Mount Bromo nearby this location to the northeast, and it's showing signs of new eruptive activity that the authorities have issued warnings to tourists to stay away. I mean, it's active. It's erupted several times over the past couple of years, but it's starting to show new activity over there. And that's no shock because we have upwelling pressure coming from down below. Now there's one thing I would like to show everybody in the chat right now. Since we're looking at the last 7 days of earthquakes, I'm going to turn this up to 5.0 and greater and show people what I noticed earlier. And what I want to draw your attention to is just something that's significant. A progression of earthquakes from Ecuador at the equator at South America across the entire southern hemisphere in a straight line along the faults going up underneath Australia and terminating at Sumatra, Indonesia. Check it out. Look at the progression of earthquakes that happened. Now, professionals deny that there's progressions of earthquakes across the planet. But this one is so obvious that even a 5-year-old would be able to connect the dots on this and make note of where the earthquakes line up with each other, spanning across the entire bottom of the planet, or the underside, or the southern hemisphere of the planet. But it didn't just stop there. It carried on up the northwest Pacific, terminating up in the Kuril Islands. And we talked about Kuril Islands last night as a spot to watch, that there may be a new progression of earthquakes that goes north beyond Japan, and now that has occurred. So a 5.0 struck right in the Kuril Islands, Kamchatka, Russia, which still leaves us a silent zone extending from Kamchatka all the way down to South Central America, north of the large activity in Ecuador. The rings kind of obscure Central America. Let me turn those down a little bit. So we have a large silent area across Central America, west coast of the United States, west coast of Canada, and the entire coast of Alaska. Now the real question is, will the 5.0s carry on up and around and complete back down to the 6.3? Will we see the whole Pacific move on a 5.0 or greater level in a week's time? That's really the question I'm asking myself at this point, because we're also looking for a single larger earthquake that may develop right in the middle of this current silent zone. Last night, when I talked about it, I said if we start to see new 5s develop up to the north and keep progressing to the east towards the United States, that would shrink our silent zone. So last night's silent zone went from Central America all the way over to North Japan. Let me show you North Japan in case you don't know where North Japan is. Here is Hokkaido in North Japan, and we back that out, and then you'll see that the 5.0 reached about 800 miles to the north, maybe just under 800 miles, but a fair distance to the north. Well, that reduced our silent zone and made the new middle of the silent zone more to the south. Now, this doesn't rule out Alaska, but it moves things to the south. And the connecting point between the 5.0 here and the 6.3 down in Ecuador, let's wait for it to repopulate, there we go, the 6.3 in Ecuador, if we draw a straight line as the crow flies across the curvature of the Earth, of course, it takes us down here right off the western shores of Vancouver, bringing us through southern Washington state directly over Mount St. Helens, coming down across Oregon, traveling further across the southwest United States, and then going down through Mexico and coming into the point down where the 6.3 is. So we have a middle point, and that middle point basically goes into our silent zone where we're already watching off the coast of Oregon, going into Oregon, Northwest California, Vancouver Island, British Columbia. It's the direct middle point right now. We may see the 5s creep over further, in which case that will shrink the silent zone again by tomorrow. We would hope to see the 5s progress all the way down and relieve the pressure all the way around the plate, as opposed to a buildup and a single larger earthquake. In addition to that, the deep earthquakes below Bolivia let us know that there's going to be shallower, larger movement up to 1 to 2 magnitudes larger. Striking in the next few days, we always see larger magnitudes strike after deep movement, usually in a nearby silent area. The question I'm asking myself, and we will see in the next day or two what actually plays off this, I'm thinking that we will see pressure transfer to the south as all the other earthquakes do. They don't just transfer underneath the plate and south, but it will press further south, causing activity possibly larger down at South Sandwich Islands. Maybe even further south, and might take us down towards the Antarctic Ridge. And why not to the north? Well, I think the 6.3, 5.8, the swarm that struck there over the past several days has relieved some of that pressure to the north. So when we look to the south, you'll be able to see a progression of recent earthquakes over the last day, day and a half, that went right down the coast of Chile. Take a look at it, guys. You know how I've talked about the earthquakes progressing over to the east over the past several days, weeks, and months? I've shown you guys. Well, they say there's no progression of earthquakes, but we know that's wrong. The pressure from the 6s over here in the West Pacific pressed over here to the east, caused our new deep earthquake, and caused a progression over the past several days to reach down Chile's coast and over here to the east, with the most recent earthquakes being the 4.5 at the South Sandwich Islands. And how many times have I mentioned the South Sandwich Islands in the past several weeks, guys? Furthermore, up to the North Atlantic, we see a 5.2 has struck. This plays into our European activity. And I'll get into the West Coast, guys, but first things first, this international activity is going to be causing our activity on the West Coast. So the 5s that are progressing all the way around the plate, let's wait for them to populate again. This is refreshing every time they disappear. Will it be a 5 that strikes off the west coast of the United States, Vancouver? Or will it be the single larger earthquake? We hope that the 5s carry on all the way and complete. And swarms develop out, small swarms, as opposed to a single larger earthquake. We watch for both. We hope for less, but plan for more. So plan for the larger one and hope for the lesser. And because we have that silent zone there, that lets us know, West Coast, you need to pay attention to what's going on around the rest of the plate. Okay? So now, let's get into the United States. Let's get into the West Coast. We'll get into this 5.2 over on the Mid-Atlantic, why it struck there, and we will get into Europe, show everybody what's happening in Europe, which plays into the 5.2 as well. And most of my viewers here in the States, you're dramatically concerned with the West Coast activity. I don't blame you. Even if you don't live on the West Coast, a lot of people are concerned. To see our activity on the coast since last night, let's look at the last 24-hour feed from the USGS. This isn't complete. I mean, it's still missing earthquakes. They miss earthquakes all day long here in the States, but they have their explanations for that, but we'll just go by what we see. And if you compare this to past night's updates, you'll see it's a new increase in activity. I'd say we're almost maybe double where we were last night. I didn't search the actual numbers, but just from the looks at it on the screen here, we are at almost double where we were in my update last night. In my update last night, we talked about how the fault zone movement down here to the south was obvious and it stood out. Well, it still stands out, but you're going to also see development to the north. Going north of Clear Lake Volcano, we have a new swarm that's developed out in Northern California. That's just north of Clear Lake, and we need to go look that up. But check it out. Eureka struck. We talked about Eureka yesterday. North of Lake Tahoe struck. We talked about that location as well yesterday. And Bittner Butte, now back into the mix. Northwest Nevada. And we're going to look this up. I got to show it to you. You guys need to see this. You need to see what is there. It's important, and I'll explain why in a second. For new viewers, we do this all the time. We go look up our earthquakes. We decide whether or not they're related to certain things that are at the epicenter. And we can make that decision when we look at what's there. You'll understand what I'm talking about right now with this Bittner Butte location up in northwest Nevada. The way we do this, we grab the coordinates from the USGS. Just grab them from their main page. Now they're right at top. You don't even have to search very hard for them. USGS has simplified their site. Looks good, by the way. I don't always dog the USGS. I do value their science and their data and their dedication and the people that work there that are actually committed to doing good science. There are people that are there. It's not an entirely evil institution. I mean, there's just, institutional things that need to be corrected within the agency for sure. But anyways, they've streamlined their site. Looks good, guys. So when we take a look at the area, you'll see Bittner Butte. This is an old tuft of basalt on top of an ancient lava flow that's spread out and weathered down over time. You can still make out some of the side on this. And it's part of a series of other volcanic buttes. But I mean, the lava flows are obvious when you really zoom in and take a look and, just take a look at the fissures that exist on the sides of these buttes. This isn't the only butte. There's one over here to the east, for instance. Okay? But Bittner Butte is the location nearby, and Blowout Mountain is right across the county line, so just a few miles east. I want to say it's 4 or 5 miles east. We have Blowout Mountain, which is an old blast. The side of this blew out like a small Mount St. Helens. All right, you can make it out still. It's ancient. It's still big, though. And back it out, we have some others to the east and several more to the south. And we have a swarm happening by Bittner Butte. All right, that's just the earthquake up here, the 1.4. When we get south of there, you get near Pyramid Lake. Right at the northwest tip of Pyramid Lake, actually. Let's show you that one. Okay, we've got a 1.2. See the lake along the border of Nevada and California. Hopefully you guys can see all that. Yeah, you sure can. All right, let's go find it and show you what's there. Here we go. Here's Pyramid Lake at the border of California and Nevada. And it took some investigation on this location before I even found this. I started zooming in on the spot. I said, you know what? Those look like old volcanoes. Somebody in the chat said, no, those aren't volcanoes, Dutch. You see volcanoes everywhere. And I said, those just look too suspect right there, their little chain formation. So I turned on the photos. And then we have Hot Springs Geyser at Pyramid Lake. And I showed this in last night's update as well. Here you go. Hopefully you can see that on the screen. Yeah, you should be able to see that. So it's geothermal, and these are old volcanic buttes. Again, the tuffs on top let us know. And they may have even been formed underwater back when this was slightly deeper. You can make out that the lake used to extend all the way up to the mountains here. It was much deeper. So that's the location for the second earthquake to the south. So first Bittner Butte, now that. Well, we get a little bit further down south, and we can pull up the largest of the bunch here, get these coordinates, happening at Cold Springs, Nevada. So another spring geothermal operation. Bless you. And we'll put in the coordinates. Sorry, guys, my wife's just right in the other room. We will zoom it in, and it's happening right next to the buttes. And these are, just like what we were looking at before over by Pyramid Lake, old basalt tuffs on top of ancient buttes formed a long time ago. We still have our lava flows nearby, but are very hard to make out since the age of that. And Sugarloaf volcanic butte. A little bit harder to see, but again, no doubt about it. And they're marked. These are marked from the USGS and Smithsonian Institute. So, all right, that's the earthquake there. And then we get further to the south, and we have those locations that I just showed you, Sugarloaf Butte and the Buttes. And then one just at the north tip of Lake Tahoe. And what's down at the north tip of Lake Tahoe? Steamboat Springs. Steamboat Springs, a small volcanic field of rhyolitic lava domes and flows about 20 kilometers south of Reno, ranges in age from 2.53 to 1.14 million years. No eruptive activity has occurred at Steamboat Springs during the Holocene. 50 active hot springs, numerous steam vents, fumaroles, and an active producing geothermal field. All right, so up here, Steamboat Springs exists all the way throughout here, the geothermal operation, north of Incline Village. All right, that's the next. So far, going all the way down the border, geothermal and volcanic. If you go due west of there, you have one lone earthquake north of Clear Lake Volcano. It's just a lone 1.7. Lone 1.7 up here to the north. Probably would be prudent to go look it up. I don't know what's there. I always look up Clear Lake, never look up north of Clear Lake, because we don't hardly ever see activity north of Clear Lake. So we'll do the same thing. We'll put the coordinates in. This will be a new one for me. If there's something interesting there, we'll find it. If not, it'll just be a fault zone movement. Okay. And what do we have going on here? Okay, we're northwest of South Butte and West Butte volcanoes. They're fracking this, by the way. This is a volcano that they are fracking, and we have frack pads, oil wells, right on the sides of this old volcano here. But that's about 40 miles away, so that's too far to be related, in my opinion, unless there's serious magma chamber movement underneath. So we have Ford Hill, Mendocino National Forest, Brushy Mountain, Bear Willow Ridge. Nothing too interesting there. Let's see what these little clearings are, if there's anything of noteworthy significance at each clearing. I mean, usually if you have a clearing, there's some reason that there's a clearing there. Somebody wouldn't just get out there in the back country and it's not like a forestry cut, which you see big blocks cut out. So it's just, this could be a small little mining operation maybe. People clear out their own little spots, stake their claim, get a permit from the BLM to do that, and they're out there and they go up and dig out a little thing, just like what you're seeing right here. Okay, well, that's what it might very well be there. Summit Springs Hill, Alder Springs, we got another spring location. Copper City. If we have copper mines, then we have old volcanoes nearby that just are either covered by the mountains themselves over time, or maybe even geothermal operations that are back up in here as well that might indicate a volcanic history to that. Nothing standing out though, but it's right along the fault zone. I mean, you can see the fault zone right there. Fault zone is huge. Stands out above all else, going all the way up through the western edge of the valley and to the west, going up through San Francisco or north of San Francisco, coming off of San Francisco and going north. So we really have two fault zones here, one to the east and one to the west, and it's falling right in between those 2 points. And this is really, honestly, it's no shock. It's fault zone movement. We talked about it last night. It was happening up and down the coast. And then we have our location up near Eureka, up in, I would go look this location up, but I don't want to get anybody in trouble due to what we found on the satellite feed there. Many of my viewers may remember what happened when we looked up stuff last time up near Eureka, and I don't want to hurt anybody or get anybody caught or anything, so we just won't show you, a random zoom in up here might reveal some people's habitual herbage operations, which I did not mean to show on a live stream. I do not want to cause anybody to go down just because I'm trying to show earthquakes up there. But anyways, earthquake struck right there. It's just a 1 anyways, and we know to expect movement along the Gorda Escarpment, going from out to sea onto land. I talked about it last night. Out to sea, onto land. Eureka. Let's show you where Eureka is. Eureka's right down here, right along the coast. There's Honeydew, Petrolia, Sugarloaf, Beach Rock, all part of that, okay? Anyways, by the way, there's Eureka. I said I was going to show you Eureka, but I showed you somewhere else. There we go, Eureka. That's the largest town nearby, but Gorda Escarpment we talked about last night. Anyways, struck there. Then to the south, Clear Lake Volcano, and all this stack of earthquakes here happening at the geothermal pumping operation, surrounding or to the south of Clear Lake. So here's Clear Lake Volcano, here's Geyser Peak Volcano, and in between the two are a bunch of pads like what we were looking at earlier, only these pads have pipelines that come off of them where they inject water down into the upper portion of the magma chamber. It's steamed off in these pipelines and take it up to a geothermal pumping operation that turns turbines. So there's more pipelines. Let's see if we can find a turbine. Yeah, there we go. There's one. And the steam feeds into here, turns turbines, comes out the top in the vents, and provides power for the area. And they'll have a whole bunch of these stations mixed in with all of the pipeline stations. So the swarm is striking there. And now let me explain why. Oh, and if you hear a boom or a rumble while I'm talking, that's earthquake striking as I'm talking. That one's up in Alaska. But the reason all this is occurring, so far we've looked at pretty much every earthquake location from the northwest tip of Nevada, south now all the way to north of San Francisco. So all of these operations here, or all of these earthquakes here, either struck at operations, pumping operations, geothermal operations, or at dormant volcanoes. Just one fault zone movement, 2 if you count the movement associated with the volcanic fields off the coast at Gorda Escarpment. So really 2 fault zone movement, and then the rest, volcanic or man-made geothermal. As we go down the coast, it gets pretty interesting. The fault zone that we were expecting to see activity along struck out to sea now with 2.7, a noteworthy earthquake, and a smaller 2.1. Now, some people were telling me that this is nearby the location where they were considering doing an offshore drilling operation. Now, I don't know if a platform got done out there or not. I know there's platforms off the coast of Los Angeles a little bit, but I didn't know of any up here. So people told me about that. I went and looked, and there's nothing on Google Earth. Let me show you. Okay. They usually include visual a couple miles out from the seashore, or at least a mile or so. And, it doesn't go very much further than that, so it's hard to tell. We got some pictures out here. Pictures, North Beach, Wales. Okay, just nothing of, what's this? Looks like I spoke too soon. Let's turn off the 3D buildings just to get the platform itself. Well, I don't know
know why that would be showing 3D. Let's check this one. Well, that's done on purpose. Unless it's on top of a seamount. Maybe that's an ancient volcano they've done that on top of. Regardless, there we go. Okay, so that is... How close is that? Let's see how close that is. Okay, our earthquake striking just to the west of the peninsula. And where are these located? These are located just to the south of the peninsula. So the earthquake struck here. I wonder how many miles that is. 11 miles. Just beyond the distance we would associate with a fracking or pumping operation. But where there's one, there's more. So I'm willing to bet if they're doing this offshore, there's probably some here on land that we might not have marked. This looks like a military range of some kind. Yeah, that sure. Well, what is this? Vandenberg Air Force Base. Usually not much pumping operations going on at at military bases. Oh boy, we'd have to almost go scour the countryside down here and go see if we have any pumping operations along the shore. They do take them right up to the shoreline. So we've caught that down more near Los Angeles, which I guess I could show you if you just want to see an example. Here we go. Okay, here's Ventura, North Los Angeles. And we zoom in here. And when I say they take the pumping operations right down to the coast, they really do. I mean, we're talking about like 100, maybe 100 yards away from the ocean. And that to me isn't smart at all. In case of a leak or gets into the ocean somehow, here's a pipeline connecting the stations. I'm going to try and find a shadow of an actual pump to prove to you, because a lot of people, again, they don't believe it. They think I'm either making it up or exaggerating. Some people accuse me of being an environmentalist. I'm like, are you serious? You accuse me of being an environmentalist? Oh, yeah, look at the gas operation there, by the way. Well, maybe we... yeah. There we go. There you go. You just got to look close enough, and then you'll start to find it. And there's many more. I mean, here's the shadow of one of the pumps, finally. It just depends on which way the sun is shining on these when they take the overhead imagery. This one's from 2/8 of 2016, so just this year they took that picture. And this pumping operation goes all the way over here to the coast and carries on. You'll be able to make it out now, all these little pads. Each one of these as well is a different oil pumping operation or gas extraction operation. Okay, so let's get back over to Earthquake 3D. If I can turn off my display capture. There we go. So as we get further down the coast, that is close enough to a pumping operation to be somewhat, if you live there, people, no wonder they were sending it to me. It's just a few miles southeast. But it's not happening directly below the pumping operation, the platforms, so we can't say it's for sure related. Okay? But, again, it's right along the fault zone. It looks like it's happening on top of two seamounts where they built those pumping operations. So they're like fracking into undersea volcanoes out to sea. Could that cause earthquakes? You betcha. Now, over here at the eastern California-Nevada border, this is all going to play into what to watch out for, but I want to look it up each night and show you guys. Each one of these locations is a volcano. Now, I'm not going to bother pulling every one of these earthquakes up. I'm just going to go show you the location on Google Earth, compare to the spot where the swarm is striking, and then you'll understand what's up. So, let's go find the spot in eastern California, east of the valley. And back it out so you can see the valley. And we're talking about central east of the valley. And this takes us right in on, again, Mono Lake Supervolcano, Mammoth Mountain, and the tip of the Long Valley Caldera, the northern tip, where the Inyo craters are. Now, there's so many photos on here from people getting out there, I almost have to turn those off. But when you see, you'll have to possibly study the area yourself or look at full screen to make out any one of these different cones inside of the Inyo craters, and there's just dozens, if not more. And we have obsidian domes. This one here, I believe, is named Obsidian Dome creatively, but these are obsidian domes. So they named an obsidian dome Obsidian Dome. But it's on the flanks of a supervolcano, and it's on the tips of a volcanic valley that goes all the way down through eastern California. And where all the volcanoes are, for instance, these, Crater Mountain, Poverty Hills Volcanic Butte, Charlie's Butte Volcano, and every one I've shown over and over again for the past several days and weeks. Here, Fish Springs Volcanic Butte, just an pile of igneous rock there, right along a fault zone, so there's no shock why they're forming there. But we get back over to Earthquake 3D, and you see earthquakes have struck all the way down the valley at the south tip of the valley, south of the supervolcano here at California's border. We haven't touched on the earthquakes over here in Nevada yet, which I will. But I just want to draw your attention to the earthquakes down here at the south tip of the valley. That's Volcano Peak, and it goes down to our pumping operation at the south tip of San Joaquin Valley, which we looked up the other day. So what about all the earthquakes over in Nevada? What's the deal with those? Well, let's get back over to Google Earth, back it out and show you. Now compare, again, the locations where all of these volcanoes are marked, and we'll jump back over to zoom in a little bit on the earthquakes, and we can triangulate our positions based upon where Mono Lake supervolcano is. Okay, so you can go east of Mono Lake and start to make out the different volcanoes over to the east. Or we can pull the coordinates. I mean, either or, guys. We can pull the coordinates on this. Let's first do it the way I'm talking about, then let's go pull the coordinates and compare. Here's Mono Lake supervolcano, and we're talking about the area over to the east. Well, this takes us down into the location where we have two unnamed volcanic buttes next to Myers Mountain Volcanic Butte. And when I say these are unnamed volcanic buttes, there's no doubt about it. This is a fissure, a split cinder cone that opened, and it's still visible in the desert. Part of others that are surely not marked up here in the back country, but the ones that are marked are the obvious of the bunch. Again, we have a tuft on top of this. It was obviously impressive when this formed that it ripped in half and lava flowed out the top, and it's happened many times in the past. There's multiple layers of this. So this has happened several times in the past several thousand years, maybe longer. Myers Mountain Volcanic Butte. Kind of more of the same. Here's our basalt standing out as obvious. And looks like a little bit of lava rock, as people call it, igneous rock. Black lava rock. All right, so that's east of Mono Lake. And we have more. We have Blair's Cone, and they're equidistantly spaced through here. So this is a volcanic field, but it's one that's unnamed. They haven't named this as, a certain volcanic field. These are just several dozen, if not more, butte volcanoes and cones that exist in a cluster. So let's go pull the coordinates for some of these earthquakes to the east and compare to the spot that I just looked up. So, it's just a 0.0 or a negative 0.3, a small earthquake, a microquake, but it's happening near Goldfield. It's not marked as an explosion. All right, so it's just a small earthquake. Proof that the ancient magma chambers are being displaced from down below. This plays into our forecast. So where is it? On the other side of the peak from the unnamed volcanic fissure. Oh, Obsidian Butte volcano here. Obsidian Butte. Obsidian, a volcanic rock. And there's more that are just not named. Certainly more here. For instance, this one, just like Obsidian Butte, just unnamed. Here's another one. Great. You can see where this tufted out before multiple times, forming new caps on top of the old volcano. And the coloring gives it away too. You don't really have to be too much of a genius to see on any of these. Many of the volcanic locations stand out. Some of them don't. Some of them are completely covered or weathered over time. And I would dare venture a guess that we might even look at some over here. Do we have tufting going out on top? Yeah, we sure do. See, the volcanic history on here, people believe that these mesas formed by wind over time, but a lot of the flat tops on these are actually from old lava flows, at least out in the west, not everywhere. So that's where the earthquake struck. Very close, all right? As we get down here to the south, this gets really interesting. We have a swarm of earthquakes here in southwest Nevada. We'll get the largest earthquake of the bunch near Pahrump, Nevada. And I've looked this location up in the past, but I think if you're a new viewer, you might be interested to see what's here. Let's just show you. Okay, so, just backing this out a little bit, you'll be able to see it's just a little bit east of where we saw the activity before. And you'll make out that there's several roads going out in here and maybe even some stuff that looks like it could have been old military. And most likely it is. These are old military test ranges where we've seen different nuclear test experiments done in the past. And there's so many craters. Again, there's so many craters that you guys wouldn't believe it. You might say, well, Dutch, I don't see any craters. Well, let me zoom it in a little bit more. Let me zoom it in just a little bit more. Okay, now you're going to start to make out the craters. And now I'm going to turn on, now that you've seen the craters, I didn't want to spoil it for you. I'm going to turn on the Google Earth Community Awareness stuff that shows us all the stuff people have marked. And you see all these eyes? I'm going to move my mouse over them and you'll see they say like US nuke, Guane, US nuke, Scooper, US nuke, Tinaja, US nuke, Penasco. Each one of these is a different underground or above ground nuclear test. So this is the nuclear test site, and all of these are craters going all the way up north. Just so many nuclear tests, it's not even funny. I mean, you wouldn't believe how many nuke tests there have been. And it's on top of an ancient volcanic complex, so that's why they blasted the heck out of it. Anyways, the earthquake striking just to the south, but well within another test site zone. So Nevada test site here, NTS Area 5, Rise Line, Doomtown, Rise Line. What does this say, Doomtown? The town too tough to die. The original effects test area enclosed. Oh, it's the original. When you see all the blast, the famous footage of the towns being blown away in the nuke test, this is it? Wow. So we have a swarm of earthquakes striking right next to it. Okay, that's great. And these look volcanic. But this was all blown away in a nuke. That famous footage of all the houses being blown up and stuff in the nukes. Wow. Well, glad I looked it up. I knew it was a nuke test site, but I didn't know it was at the nuke test site, the one that we've all seen, the one every movie in the world. And then we go just south of there, and we have a single 2.1 right at the border. You know what? I don't know what's there. This is the one. It's 23 kilometers south of Pahrump. Well, let's go look it up. Why not? It's far enough away from the nuke test site that unless it's another nuke test site, I don't know why they would do one right at the border, though. Let's go see. Hidden Hills Dry Lake. Oh, we don't have any. Calvada Springs. Boy, you wouldn't want to drink the spring water from there. I mean, no offense to the people there, but oh, it doesn't look like. Oh, well, I spoke too soon. Look at this. That is really interesting. Well, nothing to see there, guys. There's no big deal there. That's not a strange geologic formation made by ancient volcanism and deposited layers over the crust over a long time. No, no, that's nothing to see there. But how close is that to the nearest volcano? Oh, let's get a line measurement tool on this. Sorry this is taking so long, but I just want to drive home the point. 30 miles, too far to make any difference. So a lone earthquake out there. Finally, Southern California. Let's get into it. Look at the swarm. It is now spread out around Salton Sea volcanic buttes to the north, south, east, and west. We've been talking about this for over a month. It's been well over 4,000 earthquakes happening at this spot since the 5.2 kicked it all off. Are you kidding me? It's 10:45. Hello? Hello? found out none of you guys could see what I was showing. You couldn't see what I was showing off the coast either? Did you guys see what I was showing off the coast? Hopefully you saw what I was showing off the coast. If you didn't see what I was showing off the coast, I guess I got to show that too, just to be, safe. Here we go. Here's the two pump platforms that I was talking about. These are just south of the location in California, and the location in California right off the coast is right here, next to Destroyer Rock. But these are undersea volcanic buttes and parts of ridges that exist, and natural gas platforms are out here. So if there's natural gas platforms, we do have to take those into account for possibly being the cause or related to the earthquake striking within just a few miles of that location. We have more frac wells to the east, and this goes down to Los Angeles, where we saw Aliso Canyon be struck over and over again for the past several days, not today, but the last several days, striking up here in northern Los Angeles, and then down to Southern California. Salton Sea volcanic buttes. Now here's Salton Sea. Salton Sea itself formed on the edge of the buttes, which are being mined and pumped in water for geothermal purposes, but just to the northwest of the buttes. Take a look at the earthquakes down here, guys. It has been a month of this, and huge stacks of earthquakes, totaling in 4,000 or more earthquakes in the last month in Southern California around Salton Sea buttes. So, what does it mean? It means there's upwelling pressure coming from down below, and it is displacing all the different dormant volcanoes, or most of them, as well as the man-made pumping operations and even the nuke sites at this point. The adjacent fault zones are starting to move, and they're moving up and down the coast. These are color-coded by age, and we're looking at the last 24 hours. So the youngest earthquakes are in white, the oldest earthquakes are in red. So you can already see the areas to the north have moved, the areas to the south have moved, and the area in the middle is moving right now, Middle California. And we're just going by California because we have no movement recorded stopping at the state border of Oregon and picking back up at Mount St. Helens to the north of Oregon. It's like all the information out of Oregon was just cut off. I don't know. But there's no activity certainly being reported here in Oregon and even going off the coast. This means that the silent zone nearby all of this movement around California, we only have a few silent zones to watch. And where did we just get struck? Just a 1.0. The silent zones to the north and the silent zones to the south. This takes us just south of Salton Sea into the Gulf of California, Baja California, and this takes us just northwest off the coast of Oregon, going up here to Vancouver Island, British Columbia. The middle of that silent zone that I talked about at the start of this whole dang update, half of which you didn't see, unfortunately. But again, the silent zone should be struck, and it should be near to, magnitude-wise, the largest of the bunch, or the combined total of all the movement to the south. So since we don't have any larger earthquakes to go on here on the coast, just a series of small zeros, ones, and twos, we have to base it upon the combined total of all the movement to the south. And this means, also, if you take into conjunction the fives that are coming down from the north, remember how I said all the fives were coming over from Japan and stopping up in Alaska? Well, that means that there's the combined total leading up to a 5.0 off the coast. If it gets larger and we get a double whammy with the large earthquake that we're expecting compensation movement, let's say it doesn't strike Alaska and it strikes more near Vancouver. Well, then that will cause a double large earthquake. So I'm thinking that, if we got to hope that the fives progress over across Alaska in the next couple days. If they don't and we see a silent zone continue to build, Lord knows what that will build into large earthquake-wise. In just a few days, we'll know what's going to happen because it's going to play out over the next couple days in our silent zones on the West Coast. That's why I'm doing my update now, because this is the first time in an update in a long time where I've had to tell people we need to be prepared for larger movement to strike off the northwest coast and in the northwest. And then that secondary area down to the south of California, luckily it's not too populated. But the movement to the south should be in that 5 range to carry over all the way down the coast to South America. So on the west coast, just a few days' time, we will know, and it will be in the silent zone. All this activity, all these swarms, take a look at it. Compare to last night, and you'll see that we're looking at swarms in each location now, not just individual earthquakes. The nuke spot being struck is letting us know we're seeing the upwelling pressure come so close to the surface that it's displacing these caverns that are just below the surface where they blasted out maybe 1,000 feet, 500 feet of rock. So there's subterranean chambers there in the craters, and those spots are being displaced as well. They're fracture points that man created. Whether it's a pumping operation, like a fracking operation or an oil well pumping operation, or whether it's one of these underground nuke sites, it's both are causing fractures, man-made fractures, that allow for that pressure to come up and release in those spots. So on the West Coast, you got to be ready. You got to be paying attention right now to what's going on, because this is make it or break it. Either it's going to be a larger earthquake, or it's going to be that 5 that carries on down around and completes and relieves the pressure. We hope for less, but plan for more. And now you know where to plan, and you know why. Again, we have the silent zone off the northwest. Our silent zones are the spots that are struck. We base our magnitudes upon nearby movement, nearby and across the plate, depending on which spots in the plate are being hit. We already talked about the progression of 5s around the entire Pacific, so you shouldn't be shocked if a 5 does come down your way. You hope it will, because if it doesn't, it's going to build into a larger earthquake just to the north. Now, along the edge of the North American craton, we have a whole other scenario playing out right now. The East Coast was hit, the Midwest was hit. In case you didn't hear, the East Coast was hit. Let me turn on the East Coast feed, the past week's feed, which will show us our East Coast earthquakes. Here we go. Last 7 days CSV feed is showing us that the East Coast was struck. So look at all the activity that played out over the last 7 days, 1.0 and greater on the West Coast. So many doesn't fit on the map. Then the Midwest, about half of that. Then we see whatever is left over transfer over to the east. And then this takes us into where we watch for the next several days after our West Coast movement strikes. So like I said, West Coast, silent zone's going to be struck. Once that gets struck, then we see it press to the east. The pressure always presses to the east. And we see similar movement. So if a 5 strikes off the coast, you watch for an upper 4, just a little bit less than the 5, to strike interior. And it'll strike the interior western portion of the craton first, which means Yellowstone going south through Colorado. You guys are going to be in the mix this week again. Yellowstone's going to see a new swarm. South Colorado will see a new swarm. Guys, there was 36 different frac wells blew in New Mexico over the past day or two. And they said they didn't know what was causing the sudden frac well explosions. They try to blame it on all sorts of stuff. It's obvious what's causing the frac well explosions. We're seeing the pressure transfer up from underneath, and it's displacing your fracking operations right in the middle of the zone we would expect to see movement. So you can't take those explosions and just dismiss 36 different blasts. Okay? I mean, that's insane. The pressure is transferring, and we'll start to see larger movement in the next few days. That will then press to the east. And so the larger the movement off the west coast, the larger the movement in the interior mountain west, that means the larger the movement to the east coast. So we hope for less, but over this next week, you should see it press all the way to the east coast. And just like this last week, we saw 4s out west, 4s in the Midwest, 4s, 3s, and 2s in the Midwest. 2s then spread out to 1s, and 1s progressed up the coast and caused the largest of the bunch, the 2, back up in Maine, in New England on the east coast. So that's wild, and that's where you watch over the next several days. So there's many states along the edge of the plate, but only in the portions along the unsubducted edge, which takes us into the western portion of the New England states. It goes down to the south, into Georgia. If you've paid attention to any of my past updates, you know that the edge of the craton is only a small sliver that goes throughout all of these states. But that's the spot to watch, and it's a vast area. And it always shows movement, just like what we see here now. This is just the last 7 days. It'll show movement similar to that next week. And it may go larger if the earthquakes off the west coast go larger as well, which we're expecting to do. Because just this last week, it was 4s. 4s caused all this movement that you see on the screen now. So if it goes up another notch, you're going to see all of these go up another notch as well. Now, let's go turn on the combined European and USGS feed to get into our Central American, South American earthquakes, as well as the European earthquakes. I don't have many viewers over in Europe, but I do have enough that are interested in what's going on, and people tuning in from around the world who are curious about earthquakes overall. And again, the reason we look at the combined feed is because the USGS does not give us a full picture of what's going on. And as I'm talking, a near 3.0 struck at the pumping operation at Clear Lake Volcano again in Northwest California. Check that out. But anyways, last 7 days, take a look at it. A lot of movement in the West Pacific, going over across Asia in a silent zone that we're watching right now for large movement to strike. We talked about this yesterday. Well, since yesterday and in last night's update, I mentioned to you, professionals have now magically discovered that this location that I've been talking about for the last 2 years now is connected by a fault zone that they just somehow figured out to go measure. They decided to go review GPS data on this zone that we've been talking about and have found out that going through Bangladesh, going through Myanmar and Burma, going east of Nepal, that this fault zone could cause an 8.2 to 9.0 earthquake in the next 1 to 500 years. Isn't that great, the 500-year thing, right? It's like, gee, guys, thanks. Well, I can tell you this. We won't see an 8 or a 9.0 earthquake in this spot until we see nearby movement that's much larger. So if you start to see swarms of 6s going into 7s starting to develop out on either side of here, then you might want to watch out for that mega quake to occur. Right now, there's still a heavy amount of movement over to the east and to the west, but silence in this spot, which means we could see a very large earthquake strike, no doubt about it. But will it go up to the megaquake status? I doubt it. It'll be more like what we saw the last time Nepal got struck. And Nepal is right here at the north part of India. All right. And again, you guys can see all this on the screen. I know you can because I'm checking every few seconds. Now, the earthquakes that pick up over in Asia and Mideast going west through Europe, take a look at it. Scientists say that earthquakes can't progress across distances. We already know they're full of it because you can see the earthquakes progressing across the distances right here. But look where it carries up to, right across our silent zone, and then picking up with the red earthquakes that started at the start of this past week. And then our most recent earthquakes pressing to the west across Turkey, Iran, Greece, and South Europe. And it connects right over to the 5.2. See the 5.2 here? Well, the 5.2 is the leftover remnants from all of the movement that came over from this way to begin with. So coming across South Europe, pushing from east to west, that's what caused the 5.2, directly adjacent to the 3.1 and the other movement that came off of Europe this past week. And we told you to watch for it. What did we tell you to watch for on the North Mid-Atlantic over the next several days? A single 5.0 earthquake or similar thereof to the combined total of everything that struck in South Europe, because it was pressing up through Europe out towards the Mid-Atlantic ridge. And it struck. Also struck to the North Pole over the past few days, but we talked about that yesterday. This is just today's earthquakes. Take a look at it. This is the European last 50 reported earthquakes, and you can make out the progression of earthquakes across the region. So what does it all mean in Europe? Well, now that the 5.2 is hit out here in the Mid-Atlantic, a reset button has been hit for South Europe, and that's why we're starting to see a new cluster of 4s develop out back to the east. These will then build and press to the west-northwest again, and this puts North Italy back into the mix. Now, North Italy kind of got lucky. It got struck with about 4 or 5 different upper 2.0 earthquakes. Then the area around saw 3.0 earthquakes, and we were expecting a single 4.0 earthquake to strike in North Italy. So that means the pressure fanned out across the area. That's good news. It means more earthquakes, but lesser in magnitude across the area. And that's what we would hope to see. So will it happen again? Well, if the pressure's sudden enough, then it'll be that single larger earthquake. But no doubt about it, North Italy is back in the mix again. There's also news that just broke over the past day that a volcano in Italy is starting to come back alive, but they say it could erupt in between now and the next 1,000 years. And the ironic thing about this volcano is we talked about it Oh, at the start of the live stream, you guys may remember it when I open it up here, but I'm just going to search eruption, and this is going to open up Google. We're going to refine our results for the last 24 hours. And, oh yeah, we need to get Iceland off here, minus Iceland. In case you guys don't know how to do Google searches, you can minus things off or plus them on. Now here's our story. International Business Times UK, several other people running the story. Extinct volcano near Rome is waking up and entering a new eruptive cycle. And let's click on the story. Here it is. A volcano near Rome, thought to be extinct, appears to be waking up and entering a new eruptive cycle, geologists have said, while Colle Albani is not expected to erupt for at least another 1,000 years. When it does, it could be as destructive as Mount Vesuvius, which destroyed the ancient city of Pompeii in 79 DA. You mean AD, people? You need an editor there. All right. Well, let's go pull the name of the volcano. When I put it in and show it to you, my longtime viewers will remember this, hopefully. There we go. Colle Albani. And this is a spot that we showed that started to get struck by earthquakes nearby Rome and to the east of Colle Albani. And when the earthquake swarm struck here, I made note of it. I zoomed in on the area. I said, guys, we all are familiar with the other volcanoes around Italy and the active volcanoes that are erupting down to the south near Sicily and Mount Etna being one of them, okay? But not this volcano. And when I looked at it, I said, wow, it's possibly an ancient supervolcano because of the size of it. Now, they're not calling it a supervolcano, but the distance on there is 7 to 9 miles wide. Definitely larger than a standard volcano. All right. So that's the location that's being hit by swarms. Maybe less than 1,000 years, right? I mean, it might not be 1,000 years. I think they might just be putting that 1,000-year limit on there just because to cause less panic in the region. But that's no shock. Again, it's central Italy. We see the pressure transfer right up through Italy, again on its way from the Pacific all the way over to the Atlantic. And the same holds true across the entire Pacific plate. We see the main player be the Pacific, and it pushes all the other plates towards the Atlantic. So it pushes Europe towards the Atlantic. And the Pacific pushes the United States towards the Atlantic in the opposite direction. So pushing us from west to east instead of, like in Europe, it's east to west. Central America and South America are the same way. So Central America, South America, you press from west to east. And that's the progression that the earthquakes took over the past week. I talked about that at the start of this little 1 hour long update. Sorry it took so long, but I had to recap almost a quarter of the update since you didn't see it. So South America, we've got our silent zones that we're watching. The magnitudes we're watching for are 1 to 2 magnitudes larger than the 5.1 happening far down below the plate. That takes us up possibly as high as a 7.0 earthquake striking in a nearby silent zone. We talked about South Chile. We talked about the South Sandwich Islands as the way that the pressure releases, so it could be striking to the south. I'm thinking that it's not going to strike to the north. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But I'm more leaning towards the south. The reason I'm not leaning towards the north, like I said at the start, is because the 6.3 most likely relieved the pressure for northern South America. If it strikes in Ecuador again, so be it. But I'm leaning towards the south. So, that's the update. I hope you understand how I'm able to determine, and I'm trying to teach everyone so you can start doing your own forecast. Teach you how to do it. Deep earthquakes cause shallow earthquakes nearby. The deep earthquake usually causes a shallow earthquake that's 1 to 2 magnitudes larger. So if it's a deep 4, it can cause a shallow 6. Those shallow 6s spread out from the locations where the shallow earthquakes occur and cause other similar sized earthquakes or swarms that equal that similar size. We see earthquakes progress across distances, sometimes thousands of miles in just a few hours' time. We see earthquakes progress from the West Pacific, over here where our tall earthquakes are, over here to the East Pacific, where our tall earthquakes are. Again, tall equaling depth. So these are far down below in the plates. Silent zones are the spots that usually get hit next with the expected movement. And it's usually the middle of the silent zones that are hit. We see a progression of earthquakes occur, usually in similar size magnitude, across vast regions. All this plays into earthquake forecasting. You need to understand that earthquakes on half the planet away can affect you within a few days' time, and that's why you need to pay attention to international events, not just the small earthquakes in your neighborhood. When you see activity like this spreading from the equator at Ecuador, south across the entire South Pole, Antarctica, going across a very rare location in Australia and terminating near Sumatra, that lets you know the whole southern hemisphere is moved, which means if you live in the northern hemisphere, you need to watch for compensation movement, because we know every action has an equal and opposite reaction. When you push on one side of something, the other side moves. The other side is part of the same side of the thing you're pushing, so it's all going to move, right? You're not shocked when you push on a table and the table moves and the other side of the table is the same part of the table and it moves too. You're not shocked by that, right? Well, the same thing happens with the plates. They are connected. Even our quote-unquote subduction zones are connected. And I would debate the subduction thing entirely, but we won't get into that. So I'm sorry it took a little bit longer than normal. How many people are in here right now? 361. Awesome. Really cool to see. All right. 300 people in the chat. If you guys could, if you're a new viewer, please subscribe up because I need all the support I can get. And please share if you like what you're hearing and you like knowing about earthquakes and you like knowing where to watch for the next few days. Please get the word out to everybody. I can't do it all on my own. I rely on you guys to share it. You know how it goes with the social media thing. I'm not social media king, so I rely on you guys to help me get it out. I'll be back in a little while just to kind of check in and see how everything's going. I've been meaning to get into the Q&A session each night for the last several nights. Things got really messed up with the Dutch Squad group and all this other stuff. So, if anything, I'll just be blazing in and kind of just graze with you guys in here, and we'll just, poke around and talk about whatever, right? Might not even get into geophysics questions tonight and just kind of talk to you guys, see what's up. But it's really appreciated, everybody that's been getting involved. If you go down below my video, check it out. Go down below my video. There's the share buttons, which I just told you about, but I'm not talking about that. I tell you every night. I tell all the new people to do this. And I do it too. I'm going to do it with you right now. I'm going to the live stream, and below the video, there's the share buttons, and then there's 3 dots that say more. If you click on the 3 dots, it opens up a thing that says statistics. Don't report it. Report's like if you want to report a bad channel. But statistics will tell you how many people we've reached. And as of July 12th, 2 days ago, we reached 386,000 people. So the live stream has already gone up by another almost 100,000 views in the last week and a half. This is amazing. Now, that was 2 days ago. So really, here we are on the 14th. I guarantee you, we are above 400,000 views on this live stream since starting it. And that was on, June 5th? So a month and 10 days. It started on June 5th, a month and 10 days. Now, I kicked it on a week earlier just to test it, but then it just flatlined out when I turned it off. So really the first day we started was June 5th going into June 6th, but really on June 5th. And so, again, in 1 month and 10 days' time, we have reached 400,000 people. A combined total of 10 years has been watched. 10 years. Between everybody watching all at once, and then it's been shared only 2,189 times. So 300,000 people, 2,000 shares. If I could get that to go up by 1,000 shares, I'd be happy, because that would at least be keeping me on par with what you'd expect. So we're a little under on the shares. I understand people don't feel comfortable sharing this kind of stuff or whatever. They don't think earthquakes can be forecast, or I don't know why they wouldn't want to know. But again, get the word out that I'm trying to get information out to the people in the areas that are being affected. So it's not like we're just trying to scare people on the whole planet. We are trying to warn people in certain areas for expected magnitudes. And my past record speaks for itself. The professionals explain my accuracy like this. They say that I'm just getting lucky over and over again, like throwing darts at a board. Well, at least they acknowledge that I'm getting it right. They just have a BS explanation that I'm just lucky. I'm a lucky guy, guys. Didn't you know? I had a rainbow form in my backyard today. Of course I'm lucky. It's a sign of how lucky I am. The rainbow formed out of luck. There's no science behind it there. That's luck. There's nothing about light refraction going on there. There's Lucky Charms at the end of that rainbow, guys. I'm going out. I'm going to start digging for gold in my backyard immediately. I'm going out there tomorrow. Since I'm so lucky, I should just dink. First shovel in the ground, it's going to go dink, and I'm going to be like, Eureka! A new gold deposit here in St. Louis, Missouri. Who would have thought? It's awesome. It's awesome. So I'm having too much fun right now. Guys, I'm going to turn the earthquake feed back on, and we'll get the European and USGS feed back kicking. And let's make sure that it's showing all the smaller earthquakes as well and the last 48 hours of activity, like the stream says. I notice a lot of people still coming in. What is this? What is this? The gamers are especially outraged because they see me on YouTube gaming and they come in and they're like, what is this? What is this madness? And you say it's for keeping track of earthquakes, and then the next question is, but why? Why? Oh, it's awesome, man. So, anyways, word up to all my viewers, to all the new people. If you like the content, please share it and subscribe. It's the only way I'll grow. I'll be back in a little while. Enjoy the music. We're going to be playing some more retro new wave and a little bit of 80s and a little bit of this and that. And that's all I got.